Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Manufacturers Efficiency webinar series. This is our third in the series, and Rich Bello is going to be here today with Schooley Mitchell addressing the elephant in the room and talking about shipping expenses and how to save on shipping expenses, since that's a big concern to manufacturers right now. So, Rich, take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself, and I can't wait to hear your presentation.
Yep. No, thank you, Gina. Appreciate that. So the reason I'm sure all of you are here today is, like Gina said, to hear about shipping expenses and what we might be able to do to take control of them, so to speak, or at least keep them in line as best as we're able. I am Rich Bello. There I am. Strategic partner, which also means franchise owner with Schooley Mitchell. We're the largest cost reduction analysis company in North America, based up in Ontario, Canada. And Gina Tabasso is with me here as well. She's the owner of Barracuda B2B Marketing. And we have one other member of our group, Matt Wizeman. He's a focal point business coach who will be joining us shortly. The three of us actually met earlier this year, and through different networking opportunities, we came across each other, and I had a conversation with Gina, and then I met Matt, who's actually very close to me in New Jersey, location-wise, and we had a meeting, and the thing that came from both of those conversations was how each of us focuses in our businesses in helping manufacturers. So when we kind of discovered this was the case, we decided, hey, wouldn't it make sense for us to team up and kind of pool our resources and our knowledge to try and put something together to help out manufacturers as best as we're able? And that was kind of the birth of what we call the Manufacturers Efficiency webinar series. So that's how we kind of got here. And like I said earlier, we're going to be talking today about shipping expenses. The way that I set up the agenda for today, want to break it up into three different portions. First, we'll talk about why the cost of shipping is so high, and it's numerous reasons. Most of them can be contributed back to our old pal COVID-19 and the pandemic. From there, we'll get into what we have to look forward to in 2025. Look forward to, I use with quotation marks, but we know there's going to be a new presidential administration in the United States, and there's been a lot of things that have been brought up that I think will relate to our shipping costs moving forward. So wanted to touch on that. And thirdly, I want to talk about what we're able to do to at least hold these costs of shipping in check and not have them be more than they need to be. So when we talk about that first item, the reasons for shipping costs being so high, number one is something that we've heard and we know about for a long time, the price of fuel. And it's been that way for a while. Like I said earlier, the pandemic has contributed to that. There's also number three on the list here, the global market. That has played a key role in the price of fuel, because things that are going on around the world, particularly in Europe with the Russian-Ukrainian war, and in the Middle East with the war that's going on there, it's caused disruptions that are hurting the supply of fuel around the world. Russia is one of the top three oil producers and crude oil distributors around the world. They're involved in a war that obviously has an impact on what they're able to get out. And then in the Middle East, where we've seen the Suez Canal and the disruptions there in the Red Sea with the attacks on ships that have tried to pass through there and have to be rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa, leading to longer trips and obviously higher demand for fuel since they need to take those longer trips. And we know the way the economy works. When there's higher demand, the price is going to go up with it. So those things have all contributed to the fuel prices being at a very high level. Number two that I have here, a truck driver shortage. This has been debated, and I think both sides of the table would dispute whether or not this is actually the case. But what isn't disputed is the fact that the large long-haul shipping companies that employ a lot of drivers, they are having an extremely difficult time maintaining their drivers. Their retention rates are below 10% from year to year. So with them losing those drivers for various reasons, most of them probably being attributed to pay and the working conditions, but with losing those drivers in such a great quantity, the costs that those companies have to then attribute to recruiting and hiring and training new drivers is going to affect their bottom line. And when the hauling companies are spending more on that aspect of their business, they have to charge their clients, in our case, the shipping companies, more money. So that's going to drive up the cost that it's taking for us to get things shipped. And we talked about the global market. That's something that is ongoing. And I don't know that we're ever going to be in a place where there isn't some type of conflict or issue happening around the world. And since shipping is such a global thing, it involves all parts of the world, there's going to be an impact on the cost of shipping whenever things are happening abroad. So now that we talked about why the costs are high right now, we'll look forward, 13 or 14 days now to 2025. And we know now it's probably more like 3 days, working days, before pretty much everything shuts down for the week between Christmas and New Year. And then we get into it again that first, or probably more so the second week of January. But we know, as I mentioned earlier, with the new administration starting in the end of January, there's been a lot of talk by Donald Trump about new tariffs that will be enacted, and mostly they'll be affecting imports from China and Mexico and Canada. So once those are enacted, that's going to have an impact on our shipping costs, of course. What we've seen, though, preemptively, is the demand for shipping and importing in our country in the months preceding the new administration taking over. From the time of the election, even before the election, that demand has gone up because so many companies are trying to get the materials or any goods that they need shipped in before those new tariffs come into play and the ensuing rate increases. So the demand's been high already. So that's going to impact the timing. And again, when demand's high, rates tend to go up even without these tariffs. But once the tariffs are instituted and put into place, what we're probably going to see then is the demand shift to different regions that don't have tariffs that are affecting them. So again, as the demand in those regions increases, the prices will probably go up again. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on. And of course, nothing is done yet because the new administration hasn't taken power yet, but we will see how that affects us. And we are anticipating that there's going to be some price increases that go along with that. Number two here, the potential longshoreman strike, which is so what happened, as I'm sure most people know, the original strike took place at the beginning of October of this year, and it lasted 3 days, and they came to an agreement where they would extend the contract that expired at the end of September into the middle of January. So it's January 15th when that extension is up, and they're going to need a new long-term agreement in place. And at last check, they've stepped away from the negotiating table. So it doesn't seem like a ton of progress is being made there. So we'll have to see where that goes as we get closer to that date. But the impact that had in October, and that it could potentially have even for a longer period as we get into the new year, would be very significant. It's going to affect essentially all the ports on the eastern half of the United States, from Texas all the way up to New England. The ports on the western side of the country, that's a different union. They have a new agreement that they had put in place, I believe it was earlier this year or last year. So those won't be affected, but their demand will be affected if there's a stoppage or closure of the ports on the eastern side. So as that demand would increase, it would also involve longer routes for the goods to get to the West Coast. And of course, that'll increase the pricing as well. So potential aversions to having to deal with those longer routes could be going to air freight as opposed to shipment by sea. But of course, air freight is more expensive than shipping by sea also. So all told, the bottom line here is prices will go up if there is any type of disruption to the East Coast ports in the United States. So then we move on again to the Suez Canal diversions, which I talked about earlier. It doesn't appear that peace is going to come in the Middle East immediately once we get into 2025. So we're anticipating that those diversions around the Cape of Good Hope will probably continue and continue to leave or to continue to raise the shipping costs that we're dealing with to get goods into our country. So as I mentioned it earlier, there's always going to be some sort of issue or event that's happening globally that's probably going to have an impact on shipping. So these are things that we just have to deal with as they come across. But the best thing that we could do really to try and combat these things or keep them in line is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get the best rates that are available and that are possible. So what we'll talk about here is how to do that and the strategies to lower your costs. I have 3 things listed here. They kind of all play into one another when you're talking about identifying what you're actually paying, talking about the opportunity to get better rates, and then making sure that those rates are applied properly by whichever shipping vendor you're using. So we'll go into each of those a little bit more in depth.
You, Rich.
Yeah.
I wanted to chime in real quick too before we move on. One other thing that I think manufacturers are concerned about too, with the slides you talked about going into 2025, some of the issues they're facing is this whole UPS FedEx contract negotiation. So they both were renegotiating contracts and increasing their shipping rates. And in 2025, they announced an almost 6% increase, and some surcharges are increasing. So again, that's going to have an impact on delivery and shipping costs. And the other thing is, if there's people who are listening who aren't manufacturers, it starts at the manufacturing side, which is the backbone of this country, but it affects consumer costs. So, these costs, as they go up to manufacturers, what happens? Those costs get passed on to consumers, as we all saw during COVID. And so it's in everybody's best interest to mitigate those costs if possible, because, even manufacturers are consumers as well. They have families to feed. And so they don't want to see costs go up either, because it's going to have a direct impact on their families and friends' lives. So I just wanted to chime in and say that as well, to kind of put it in context for people listening who may not even be in the manufacturing space.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for bringing that up, Gina. That's something that I'm going to get into a little bit more in depth on one of the upcoming slides with regards to UPS and FedEx and the announced increases.
I should have
And
known you had it covered.
but yeah, no, it is important, and it does play in because that is topical now with 2025, because they did just announce those rate increases. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, which is standard. They do that every year. They increase the rates. All companies do that, so that's something that isn't new, but there are ways to mitigate those expenses. And you mentioned the surcharges and the accessorial charges. That's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth here in a few minutes. So what we're talking about with regards to shipping and identifying the costs and trying to set what your budget should be for your shipping expenses, a large part of that really comes down to knowing what your rates are and the agreement that you have, whether it be with a FedEx or UPS or any of the vendors that you use, or whether it be a broker. Just knowing exactly what you're supposed to be paying and what the rates are is a key part in the whole battle of trying to make sure your costs are as low as they could be. Because when I look at a contract from a FedEx or UPS, it's a lot of different variables and rates and discounts, different discount percentages. You're talking about zones and weights and methods of shipments. There's a lot of different categories that go through and are addressed in that type of contract. And when I first started in this business with Schooley Mitchell and having a hand in looking at this type of information with regards to shipping, the first contract that I looked at and I saw the discounts, and they range anywhere from like 50 to 80% or more in discounts. And I think, oh, well, that's great. If the discounts are that high, that must mean that something is in favor of the shipper. And in some cases that's true, but in other cases that's not always the case, because those discounts either don't account for what they should be accounting for or aren't being applied properly. So again, the key point here for this first topic is knowing what your rates are and understanding the way that you should be getting charged for the different types of shipments that you're making. Point two, negotiating with suppliers. The contracts, obviously, when you have a contract, any type of contract, really, not just shipping, when you sign that contract, you tend to think, okay, these are the rates, or this is what I'm getting, this is what I'm paying, and it is what it is. That's not necessarily always the case, especially with regards to shipping. And I've seen it in multiple occasions with different clients of mine where they have a contract in place, the contract hasn't expired, but when you do go and talk to the vendor, to the shipper, or the shipping company, they are able to make adjustments to that contract. And if not include additional discounts, at least apply discounts in a better, more favorable way for the shipper. So having those conversations and going into those conversations with the knowledge from step one that I just talked about in terms of knowing your rates, and not just what your rates are, but what your volume is, what you're shipping the most of, how you're shipping it. Knowing that volume and where you index the highest can really be beneficial when you have the conversation with the shipping supplier that, hey, this is what we're doing the most of. We should get a better rate or a better discount for this because we're doing it so much with you guys. So having that knowledge is key to these conversations. Also, you want to talk to other suppliers. So if you're with FedEx, you want to talk to UPS. You want to know what the other going rates are, so you have that in your back pocket when you have a conversation with your current vendor, and you could use that as part of the negotiation. On this part, the third part here, when it comes to implementing your budget and making sure that you meet that budget. So the first two steps in terms of understanding your rates, trying to negotiate better rates, they all feed into this third step, which is making sure that those new rates that you negotiated are what you're actually getting charged for. Because as Gina mentioned earlier, there's all sorts of different surcharges and accessorial charges, all sorts of charges that these shipping companies will apply to individual shipments based on all types of things. Usually the size of the package or the weight of the package is a contributing factor, but it also could come into play with where the item is going, if it needs to be overnighted, of course, ground versus air, all those types of things will apply when it comes to what your rate actually is. But I was talking to one of our analysts at the Schooley Mitchell head office who focuses specifically on shipping. We had this conversation last week, and she was telling me about the surcharges that she saw one Schooley Mitchell client getting charged for their packaging that wasn't accurate with what their rates should have been. And essentially the issue was this client shipped two different types of packages. One was a larger box, one was a little bit smaller box. And the larger box, they included additional packing materials inside to make it a larger box because the item was fragile and they wanted to make sure that it was protected during the shipping process and it didn't get damaged. So when that's the case and you have a larger box, but the reason for the larger box is just to protect it, the client, the shipper, shouldn't be charged extra for that extra packing material. And what the shipping companies will do to try and account for that is use what's called a dim divisor. And the dim divisor is a figure that is applied when the shipping company is calculating the weight of a package. If there is all that extra shipping materials included, there'll be a higher dim divisor so that when the calculated weight is measured, they'll divide it by the dim divisor to get a more accurate weight of the product that's actually being shipped. So in this particular instance that the analyst was telling me about, the shipping company, I forget which it was, but either FedEx or UPS, they were all emphatic about, well, we're giving you guys this higher dim divisor to account for your particular packaging. It's going to be great. And that's all well and good. But when our analyst looked at their invoice for the month, she saw that the dim divisor was being applied to the wrong products. Or the wrong shipments. So the smaller packages were the ones that were getting the dim divisor, and those were not as high of quantity as the larger packages. And those larger packages were not getting the dim divisor. So they were being charged more for the items that they had this dim divisor initially installed for. So if you're not looking, going back to what I was saying earlier, if you're not looking at what you're actually getting charged and how the vendor is charging you for it, there could be these errors that take place. And I'm sure everyone that's seen a monthly invoice from a shipping company will know it's a big spreadsheet with a lot of columns and all sorts of information on each individual package. So most people don't have the time or don't have the desire to look through all that stuff, but that is where you'll find these types of errors and the opportunity to call the vendor out on what they're doing and how they're doing it improperly for you and costing you more money than it should be. And this is something at Schooley Mitchell, this is what we do for our clients, essentially, is we go and we spend all that time to look through all those invoices each month and make sure that the discounts that you have, the rates that you've negotiated with the vendors are being applied properly. We also do the negotiating for our clients, so you don't have to spend that time either. So that's one of the benefits of our service. So we've talked a lot about shipping and shipping in a general sense so far, but I wanted to get into specifically how this applies for manufacturers and what you guys are doing in your businesses and in your industry. We have a client, Gupta Permold Corporation. They're based in Pittsburgh, and they do a lot of aluminum casting, CNC machining, and they're a pretty big company. They were paying a lot in their shipping expenses, they came and worked with one of our franchisees who's in the Pittsburgh area, and we're able to do some great work for them, looking at their less than truckload shipping, their small package shipping, and also the supplies, like we were saying earlier, the boxes, the tape, the bubble wrap, all the stuff that goes into preparing a package for shipment. I just wanted to share some of the results that we found from the analysis and the negotiation that we did for them. They were spending over $350,000 a year in their less than truckload spend, and we found them $41,000 in savings a year, so 12% savings there. Their small package shipping, which is, as you can see here, their biggest line item in terms of cost, they're spending over $1 million a year. In that, we were able to negotiate a 15% reduction. They saved $154,000 a year. And then the supplies themselves, they're spending about $119,000 a year, and we negotiated a discount there of $19,000, so 16% reduced. And as you see overall, they saved over $240,000 a year on their shipping, all told, and 13.5% of what they were paying previously. And this is just a testimonial from the CEO of the company. He talked about how they were able to save all this money, and the key component for them was that they didn't even have to change their suppliers. It was all through the same suppliers that they were already working with, the shipping company, the LTL company, and their supplies company, and they still ended up getting all those savings. So we will provide a link later of this whole presentation, so you'll be able to access all these slides and see all the details.
Hey, Rich, I wanted to read a comment for you that came in from one of our attendees. He said, Rich, having a simplified invoice is a lever we can use during contract negotiations. If every invoice has to be checked and all the detailed charges are to be understood, we will need a full-time employee all the time just to review those. Yeah. So, just the value of having someone look at those invoices, because that is a full-time job. That's 100%. A really great comment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you indeed, Raman. That is a great comment. And I always say, whenever I talk about what I do and what value I could bring to my clients, the money is great. Saving money obviously is very important, but I usually lead with the time, because the time that it takes to do those types of things, like Gina just mentioned, like Raman, you mentioned, people don't have that type of time. Most businesses don't have a person who their sole role is to look at invoices month after month, line by line, item by item. So that's what we do. And that's I think a big part of our service at Schooley Mitchell. So just to go further on that, a little bit about Schooley Mitchell, the largest independent cost reduction firm in North America. We have a staff at our head office of over 100 employees that each are focused in the different cost categories that we look at, including shipping. And I think a key part of the whole equation and why it works with Schooley Mitchell is that we don't have any deals in place. We're not a broker for any of these companies, whether it's FedEx or UPS, or if we're talking about phones and it's Verizon or AT&T. We don't work for them. We don't get kickbacks from them. All we work for are our clients and trying to make sure that they get the best rates that are out there. And not just the best rates that are out there, but the best service that accommodates what their specific situation is. So it's not always going to be just whatever the cheapest vendor is. It's going to be the best rate for the best service that they need for whatever it is that they're doing, in this instance, shipping. So I think that's an important part of it all. You could see some of the numbers. There's over 30,000 clients that we've worked with in the 20 plus years we've been in business, and over $600 million that we've saved. And then I don't have the figure here, but it's countless hours as well in time that the companies don't have to spend to do this stuff themselves. This is a brief breakdown of how it works and what we do. And you could see the first part is just getting an understanding of our client, how they function, what they do, how they do it. And then from there, we go into the negotiation phase, which is talking to the incumbent vendor, trying to negotiate better rates, but also talking to other potential vendors that could offer better rates. And one of the things that I think is important about the way we do it is we're not just trying to switch our clients to a different vendor all the time. Our main goal and what we do 80+% of the time is keep our client with their current vendor. So there's no changes other than better rates that we're paying. But we leverage the rates from other competitors to get the incumbent vendor to come down with their rates. And then the third phase there, we present our findings to our client. They choose if they want to move forward with any of the recommendations that we make. And up through that point, we don't charge our client anything to do that entire analysis. We only make a fee based on the savings that the client ends up recognizing from the recommendation that we made. And phase 4 there is that we implement it for them as well. So it's not just here's your new rates, have fun getting them set up. We do that for the client as well. So they just go about their business and don't have to worry about it. So just to summarize what we talked about today, the shipping costs, as everyone knows, have been high since COVID. We don't really see much reason to believe that they're going to just automatically go down on their own based on numerous factors that we discussed. But finally, there are opportunities to get your costs to be lower, at least what they should be, as low as they can be. And part of the work that we do at Schooley Mitchell is helping clients to do just that. So here we are, the Manufacturers Efficiency Group. Matt, I'm glad you're able to join us. You could see that we have our QR codes if anyone wants to check out our websites and book a meeting with us, talk to us about what we do. We'd love to do that. And I know we're getting closer, just a bit past the 30-minute mark. So I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Just wanted to let you all know that we do have upcoming events. In January, Gina's going to be talking about marketing and why manufacturers need it. It's on January 15th. Matt on February the 19th is going to be talking about exit strategy. And then I'll be back again on March the 19th to talk about waste expenses. So you'll see on LinkedIn, I put it on Facebook as well. I send emails as well about these events as they're upcoming. So look out for those and the invites to them. And then we'll open the floor. If anyone has anything else they'd like to mention, any comments, any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Just as an FYI, the times will always be Eastern Standard, so 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you're not in another time zone, just make sure that you're aware it's EST that we're doing our live webinars.
Yep. Thank you for that, Gina. Yeah, and also just before anyone logs off, just wanted to thank you all for being here today, and also wish everyone very happy holiday season, prosperous New Year's, and look forward to seeing you all again back next month in the next episode of this series.